Welcome to Beyond Sunday from Schweitzer Church. I'm your host, Jason Leininger, and in studio with us today, we have Corbin Lucivo, otherwise known as Corey, or Pastor Corey to some folks. Corey is the pastor of discipleship, our original POD here on campus. For some of you who are very much into the sheltered Christian music landscape of the last 20 years, you'll know what that means. For those of you who aren't, you have something to look up on Uncle Google. But Corey, today, thanks for being here. And in studio, you're going to talk about practicing the way.
Yeah.
Give us a brief introduction into what practicing the way is.
Sure. So practicing the way is an invitation into spiritual practice. It's an 8-week course that will walk you through a framework for spiritual formation. It's going to talk about the type of formation that we're all involved in all throughout our lives, and how we can become apprentices of Jesus and begin to follow the practices that Jesus followed, and what that looks like in our lives.
When you say an 8-week practice, kind of understanding what it is to be an apprentice of Jesus, what are some of those practices that will be brought up or that people will be introduced to, will be invited into participate in?
Sure. So some of the practices include scripture, prayer, Sabbath, generosity, witness, those sorts of practices. And as the church dives deeper into practicing the way, there are deep dives into each of those individual practices, but the course is less of a survey of a bunch of specific practices, and is more about giving us a tool set to be able to evaluate those practices in our lives, and where are we at currently, and what does that look like to even create space in our lives to even begin to explore those different practices.
What do you mean by exploring it or understanding it better? Don't you mean to some level like doing an actual practice, like doing the stuff?
Absolutely. The word practice is really important because, first of all, we're not going to be perfect at it, and that we don't have to be. This isn't about a set of rules of here's these lofty standards that you have to attain or feel bad about yourself. This is something that we practice and get better at. But the other reason practice is important is because this is not just something we're going to learn and talk about and think cool thoughts about. This is something we're going to do together. And so the rhythm of practicing the way is about exploring practices, having a discussion about those, and then going home and actually living them out, exploring, figuring out, experimenting what that looks like, actually implemented into our life rhythms. And then we come back together, and as a group, we reflect on that together and talk about where were the struggles, where did we find success, what did that mean for us in our lives.
Do you have any examples or any stories of people who've done some of the practicing the way literature in the past, and how that's influenced or informed their lives?
Yeah, I can tell you there was a group that went through practicing the way earlier this spring, and recently we got back together a few months after that class to just the idea was just to hang out. But what I noticed was that practicing the way had really shaped our language and thinking in a really deep level. And so we found that in our natural discussions that night, that practicing the way had given us a common language to put into words and to be able to reflect intentionally on our life rhythms. And so it wasn't just about having a formal set of questions that we had to ask and discuss in a classroom setting. This was a more casual environment where those conversations were just naturally spilling out, and we were naturally thinking about what when we say how's it going, that's not just about what you did this week, but also about what's your spiritual practice been like in the last couple months since we met.
So how would you answer that question for yourself?
Well, I have found that that incorporating spiritual practices in our lives is it's a challenge because our lives are full. We have a full to-do list of things that take up our time and our attention and shape us into a particular type of person. And so the biggest challenge around this new idea of apprenticeship is really about what do we take out, what are we removing, what are we subtracting from our life practice to even make space for more intentional spiritual practices. And so in recent months, my wife and I have had a lot of discussions and reflection and intentional shifts towards how do we take things out of our lives to make space for better things, healthier things, things that give us life. And so, but it's a challenge. We are not perfect at it. We're practicing. We are very much still practicing, but finding joy and life in both the successes in that and seeing where our spiritual practices have grown and where we've really experienced a closer relationship with Jesus through that, and also seeing where the friction points are in our lives where we're really struggling to incorporate the type of practice that we want to.
I think one of the spiritual practices that I never thought was a spiritual practice until the last several years, but has been most informative and most helpful to me, is the practice of taking a nap. And it's a practice that renews me like nothing else. And I've really become reliant upon the energy that comes from taking a small nap in the middle of a day. And it's one of the ways that the Lord just reminds us that He's in control of everything.
Yeah, one of the things that excites me about practicing the way is that while they do talk specifically about a few of some of the big spiritual practices that a lot of us are familiar with, scripture, prayer, worship, those sorts of things. There's also a lot of space in there to find what practices speak to us and where God works in interesting spaces. And that often spiritual practice is less about the specific activity that we're doing and more about the mindset and the heart that we have going into it.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody wanted to sign up, be a part of some Practicing the Way exercises groups that are happening this fall, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, we have a ton of groups, 5 or more groups that are going to be going through Practicing the Way this fall, beginning in early September, beginning around September 4th. If you're interested in learning more about that and finding a group, we'll have groups all throughout the week, both on the church campus and off. You can find more information on the Church Center app, at the Blue Booth on Sundays, or feel free to email me.
And your email would be?
Cory, Cory, @schweitzer.church.
Yes, because when we tried to spell your last name, that was too hard to put into an email address.
It's true. Better not to try.
So it's just Cory, Cory, @schweitzer.church.
Mm-hmm.
Cory, thanks for telling us about Practicing the Way. I pray that you learn to take naps and rejoice in the spiritual discipline of napping. It's pretty awesome. And to all those of you who listened to watch today, a big thanks. We always look forward to seeing you on Sunday. We always look forward to hearing what God is up to in your life beyond Sunday.